An aspiring actor goes to Spain in search of Victor, a character in a play he wants to meet in real life, so he can learn how to act like him. In the opening scene, we see the real Eliza, Victor's love interest in the book. Some lines describing her golden eyes are being read as a much older and wiser Eliza enjoys her time at the beach, a decade after the iconic love story that would make James search for it. In the book, Victor describes her eyes as something like he's never seen before, but also something he'll never see again. The scene cuts, and we're taken to Spain in the present. Victor, or Carlo, the author who portrays himself as him, sits by a table enjoying his drink while a local man plays his trumpet. Over in the S, we see the aspiring actor James for the first time in an acting class. Among other aspiring actors, he tries to loosen up his face while the rest of them do similar exercises to prepare. However, he notices that everyone is letting out weird noises and begins to feel weird. Being the only silent one, he gets approached by the coach who encourages him to let out a sound. He tries, but as she leaves, he goes back to working on his face. After warming up, James sits one-on-one with the coach while reading the same lines about Eliza as in the opening of the movie. The coach notices that he's not giving much effort, making it sound like he's reading a text, but she doesn't interrupt him. As he finishes, she asks what Victor's heartful words mean. Confused, he shrugs his shoulders and assumes that it's about love. Given that they've been practicing for weeks without any progress, Coach Shelley lets him know that he has to get to know Victor, put himself in his shoes, and find who his Eliza is. James begins to think that he's not meant to be an actor, and Coach Shelley agrees. However, he's already been in the class for a while, so the only way to find out is to try and see what will happen. He apologizes, but Shelley asks him not to. Instead, she begs him to give his maximum to the role. Carlos enjoying his drink and relaxing in the summer breeze when an attractive woman excitedly sits next to him. She starts hugging and kissing him while telling him all about the new dress she has bought. While Eliza and Carlos seem to be having a delightful afternoon, Carlos' son happens to be struggling with his writing. Frustrated, he throws the papers and watches them fall all over the room. However, he isn't the only one having a hard time as James gets broken up once he goes back to his apartment. At the entrance of the building, he sees moving boxes and wonders who they belong to. Walking up the stairs, he sees his girlfriend's father and begins to panic. Running up to the apartment, he sees his girlfriend with a box in her hands, moving herself out. Confused, he asks what she's doing, but she begs him not to ask for an explanation. His heart breaks as she tells him to sort his life out before leaving the apartment. It dawns upon James, and he becomes upset, heartbroken that he has lost his love for the thing he loves to do. In the evening, we see Carlo and his girlfriend Veronica at a play performed by his son. As the lights dim and the curtains open, his son appears on stage and gives a rather weird performance about demise. The crowd seems to be confused and Carlo can't help but palm his face. After the show, they stand outside waiting for Henry when he joins them, visibly upset. He asks his father for an opinion and Carlo decides to be honest. He let him know that the show wasn't good and that his performance was boring. Henry gets defensive, claiming to have known that he will complain. Veronica tries to calm them down and assures Henry that his father is proud of him. Not wanting to argue anymore, Carlo asks Henry whether he can enjoy his evening and Henry agrees that they shouldn't be bickering. They say goodbye to each other and head their way. Over in the United States, we see that James has gone out to cheer up a little bit. At the bar, he gets approached by an old friend of his who is surprised to hear that he isn't a lawyer anymore. Given that her shift ends in 20 minutes, she invites him for a drink afterward and he agrees. The old friends go back to his place to catch up. James tells her all about his midlife crisis, and she assumes that it's far more serious than what he makes it out to be. Annoyed, James complains about nobody understanding his passion. Although he's set on nailing the character of Victor, he knows that he needs to do something bigger to get close to it. Jokingly, he suggests finding the real Victor, and she laughs, reminding him that he's just drunk. Instead of searching for a character, she encourages him to make it up to Britt, but later sees that it might be best for him to chase Victor. Coincidentally, in the next session James goes to, the coach talks about finding their true selves. For years, she had felt dumb committing all of herself to acting just to end up in a 30-second commercial. However, she learned that there is a lot for her to discover, and that she does it to fulfill herself. She admits that she can't tell them how to do a performance or what to do about it. The only thing she can encourage them is to find their personal truth. Shelley's words touch James deeply, so as he reads his book by the water, he imagines Victor's words to Eliza about her touch and beautiful brown skin. Simultaneously, we see Eliza reading the book about her and reminiscing about those times in the book. In the next session, Shelley finds out that James is struggling with pronouncing the letter R in the Spanish language because he hasn't learned any romantic languages in school. He watches her rolling her tongue and tries to impersonate her movement. Shelley sits down, ready to go over the lines again, when James surprises her by revealing that he's bought his ticket for Spain. She compliments him on his bravery and only hopes that he can conquer Victor when he comes back. Tuesday comes, and we see James arriving at the train station in Barcelona. Getting out of the train, he looks around intrigued to explore more. As he leaves the station, he explores the city and the many beautiful buildings and statues, before finding himself in the narrow streets. While he checks into the Hotel Adagio, Henry is on the other side of the city holding auditions for his next play. The actors on stage are lacking chemistry, therefore boring Hurry and everyone else in the audience. Having had enough, he thanks the girl for trying and calls out to Anna. A rather interesting-looking girl with golden curls comes on stage, and as they begin their performance, Henry's mind races as he aggressively writes something down in his script. James wastes no time in trying to find Victor as we see him leaving the hotel to explore some more. For his first stop, he decides to visit the beautiful old cathedral where all of his wishes will be heard. Being a book lover, we see him at the local bookshop looking through some books when Carlo walks in. He becomes intrigued by his nature, but once he takes a look at him and checks the author's picture, he realizes that he is the author of the story about Victor and Eliza. Carlo leaves, but James doesn't let him get away. Creating some distance between them, James tries following him through the narrow streets. However, he is surprised when Carlo asks how long he plans to follow him. Struggling to find the words, he gets interrupted by Carlo inviting him to go to Barcelona. Carlo laughs and jokingly assumes that he's a stalker. They sit down and get to know each other. James made sure to express his honor of meeting him. He believes that fate has brought them together, and he assures him that he's just a big fan. Instead, he opens up about his passion for acting and reveals that he had left his career as a lawyer to become someone he wanted to since childhood. Carlo has the same reaction as everyone, but James assures him that his passion will pay off. However, James is facing a problem, and he explains that despite wanting to become an actor, he finds it difficult to connect to a character. Poor Carlo becomes even more confused as he decides to ask what he's in Spain. Finally, James uncovers that he has come to meet the real Victor. Carlo chuckles, but becomes quite upset shortly, as he's sure that he'll never write anything better than the book about Victor and Eliza's love story. Regardless, he lets James know that Eliza is a made-up character that doesn't exist in the real world, lying to his face that he had made it all up. Changing the topic, he asks where James is staying. He tells him about the old hotel, but Carlo doesn't accept it, as he has plenty of rooms to spare in his house. With a huge grin on his face, James agrees. Shutting off the lights in the small theater, Henry makes his way out only to be approached by Anna. Avoiding eye contact, he tells her that she's not fit for the role, but she surprises him by asking whether she can make the costumes. He stays silent and hesitant, so she takes it as a sign to leave. However, he calls out to her and asks what she has in mind. Excited, she let him know that she'll need to read the whole script before she comes up with some costume ideas. He agrees, and she even invites him for a drink. After taking the not-so-short Carlo had promised, the new friends arrive at the house and are greeted by Veronica. As everyone else, Carlo can't help but admire her beauty, despite her only greeting him. They head to the bar, and he can't help but let Carlo know that he has a beautiful daughter, assuming that Veronica's his offspring. Chuckling, Carlo lets him know that she's not his daughter. He finally gets the gist, even though Carlo doesn't say anything in particular. He apologizes, but gets cut off by Carlo raising his glass for a toast. In the evening, the newfound friends enjoy a night in while we see Eliza's night out with her son and his girlfriend. They dance through the narrow streets and fill them with laughter while Carlo falls asleep from drinking too much. Luckily, Veronica can be calling out his name, so when she finds him on the couch, she helps get him to bed. Coming back, she joins James for a glass of wine. They start talking about their acting, but soon find themselves talking about Carlo's plays and how incredible James thinks they are. Frustrated, she lets him know that there's no need to get to know her since Carlo hasn't written any plays about her. Confused, he asks why, but she doesn't seem to have an answer. Given that she's much younger than him and that he hasn't written a play about the love he has for her, James assumes that she's with him for his possessions. He comments rudely about her landing herself the beautiful house, and it upsets her quite a lot. She snaps at him and reveals that she has inherited the house from her grandfather. When she and Carlo met, he didn't have anything to his name, so she had let him move in. asking him not to assume that she's a gold digger. She assures him that she loves Carlo for the way he is because he makes the world magical. Thinking that he's crossed the line, James lets her know that he'll pack his bags. However, she asks him to stay since that's what Carlo wants. She goes to her room, and having nothing else to do, James goes to his. In the room, he sees different kinds of posters of the play he's obsessed with. He also comes across the book, but as he looks through the pages, he finds a small paper that has Eliza's true identity on it. Quickly, he stuffs it in his pocket and goes to bed. In the morning, before everyone else is up, we see Henry waking up in Anna's home. Looking around, he's confused, but she soon comes with coffee in her hand. Feeling ashamed, he claims to have been drunk the previous night, so she asks whether the marriage proposals have meant something to him. Not sure what to say, he stays quiet, so she lets him know that she has said yes the previous night. Over at Carlos, the men get dressed and Carlo decides to show James around. They explore the old building and Claro explains a lot to James. Evening comes, and we see the trio at a bar. A young lady is singing a jazzy tune as the crowd enjoys both her singing and the melody playing in the background. Once she finishes, Carlo and Veronica decide to leave as well. Before they go through, Veronica tells James to find himself a girl since they're pretty girls in the club. James isn't interested in meeting new girls because he still isn't over Brit. Nevertheless, what occupies his mind mostly is the fact that Eliza could be walking next to her, and he wouldn't know that it's her. Finally, he gets out of the bar and decides to walk around. By fate, he comes across the theater and sees the names that match the ones in the small paper he found. He gets courage all of a sudden and decides to call Brit. It goes to voicemail, so he begs her to call him and take him back because he misses and loves her. In the morning, James wakes up not feeling well. He tells Carlo about calling Brit and even asks for advice. Carlo tells him that he only has two choices: to write about their love as cowardly as he did for 40 years, or to go and chase her. James realizes that he has lied about the stories not being real, so he makes sure to call him out for it. Admitting that he lied, Carlo assures him that he's living an amazing life with Veronica, regardless of not being with Eliza. Knowing that he'll have to take matters into his own hands, James suggests they go to the bar the following evening for some live music, knowing that Eliza's son will be there. Little does he know what lies ahead. Carlo gets excited and decides to invite his son for a night out as well. He is surprised when Henry tells him that he'll be bringing Anna along, so he invites them to the house before they leave for the party. In one narrow street where an antique boutique can be found, we see Eliza walking by when the memories come flashing back. In the evening, everyone gathered by the table enjoying dinner on the warm summer night. Carlo asks Henry about his new play, so he doesn't miss the chance to compliment Anna's creations, which will be of huge help. However, he complains about not having a lead actress because it's hard to find English-speaking actresses in Barcelona. Carlo's eyes widen as he remembers that Veronica is an actress. He suggests he take on the leading role, but she gets shy. They manage to convince her, and even Anna chimes in, assuring her that the dress will make her look like a goddess. Feeling like taking a risk, Carlo asks for a role for James. He doesn't get shy, but admits that he has no acting experience. Luckily, some roles have doubled in the play, so Henry suggests he tries one of them out, checking the time Carlo asks when they're going to the party, and feeling guilty. James lets them know that they don't have to go. They don't listen to him, and we find them all at the party shortly. Though everyone seems to be warming up for the performance, Carlo notices that James is acting strange, so he asks whether everything is fine. James is about to reveal the truth when a woman comes down the stairs and catches their attention. Carlo starts to tremble at the sight of Eliza as Veronica happens to approach him. Worried, she asks what's wrong, and he excuses himself outside. James follows, and just as expected, he gets scolded for messing up his life. He can't believe that he would do something like that to him, and doesn't believe that he didn't know that she would be there. However, instead of feeling scared or ashamed, James becomes angry. Angry because Carlo was the one who encouraged him to take chances and be brave. In the end, he does apologize, but reveals that he had planned the night for only the two of them. Their conversation is interrupted by Veronica. When she asks what's wrong, they put their happy masks on and head back inside. At the entrance, Eliza and Carlo see each other after so many years. It's evident that there's much love between them. So while Liz is being kind and polite, Carlo tries his best to calm down. Seeing Veronica by his side, she assumes that she's his beautiful daughter, but Veronica lets her know that she's his girlfriend rather aggressively. She drags Carlo to the entrance, but before he can go, Eliza tells him that her son is the drummer of the band. Noticing how shaky she becomes after Carlo goes back inside, James approaches her to introduce himself. He knows that he's on the right track, so he invites Eliza to join him inside. Inside the club is where the true drama is. Veronica has realized that the woman is Eliza, and judging by the way he looks at her, she is convinced that he's still in love with her. James tries to make her believe that he's over Eliza, but deceives himself as the beautiful woman walks down the stairs, catching his attention. Having had enough, Veronica grabs her purse and decides to run out of the club. Carlo runs after her, but given his age, he struggles to keep up. A big distance is formed between them when Carlo begins to feel some tightness in his chest. He calls out to her, and once she sees that the situation is serious, she runs back to help him. The party may be over, but James doesn't plan to stop there. We see him at Eliza's house having fun before joining the ladies in the kitchen. Liz pours him the wine of summer, and as he takes a sip, he happens to love it. Grabbing his wine, he heads out to the balcony to join Eliza. Judging by what he's read about her, he asks whether she'd ever been called Eliza. Given that her name now is Liz, she explains that she was called Eliza a long time ago. Smiling, James lets him know that she's just like he had imagined her. She doesn't understand him, so he tells her about the plays. Like Carlo, she doesn't reveal the truth and claims to not have read any plays of Carlo. The reason being that she didn't want to be inspired when she was trying to become a writer herself. Changing the subject, she asks James to tell her more about himself, but he still can't believe that she hasn't read any of the plays. The party continues regardless, and he ends up staying until sunrise. In the morning, as he heads out to leave, Liz asks him to say hi to Carlos from La Serena. James arrives at the house, but is met by an angry and sad Veronica. He apologizes, letting her know that he didn't know that she would be there, but she doesn't believe him. Since his arrival, he has tingled in their marriage, and she struggles to understand as to why. Not wanting to hear him anymore, she demands that he leave, so he goes to pack his bag. In the meantime, we see Carlo picking up his old book about Eliza, where he keeps some of her photos from back when they were in love. Sadness and regret can be noticed on his face as he looks through the photos of the only woman he truly loves. Seeing his son arrive at the house, he jumps back to bed. While everyone else seems to have had an awful morning, Henry's morning was filled with love. Despite being in good spirits, Henry becomes scared as Veronica lets him in on the details from the previous night. He visits his father, who's finally come to his senses. He knows that it's unfair to be with Veronica because she's so young, and the last thing she deserves is to wait for someone to perish. Not only that, he knows that he still loves Eliza, and seeing her in real life has confirmed that. Making up his mind, he packs his suitcase and waits for her to come. Entering the room, she sees everything packed and begins to fear the worst. She asks him if he's leaving her after saving his life, and he nods his head. Heartbroken, she sits next to him to let him know that he can't leave her. Looking into her eyes, he tells her everything he thinks. Not wanting to be a burden, he encourages her to find someone close to her age, so she wouldn't have to worry about them expiring every day. She is sure that she will never love anyone like she loves him, but he knows that she will. Beginning to sob, she hangs her head low so Carlo puts his head on her shoulder. James returns to his hotel, which is where Henry officially gives him the whole script. Carlo stays at Henry's apartment, and in the morning they agree to rehearse the costumes and see how they look on stage. So, while James and Veronica are doing their best to hold such a tragic performance, Carlo can't help but shed a tear as he recognizes the sadness in Veronica's eyes. After the rehearsal, Henry asks for his first impression, and for the first time, Carlo has some positive words about his son's work. Shortly after Henry leaves, James walks out and doesn't really know how to act around Carlo. Luckily, Carlo invites him for a drink, so they sit at the nearest bar. Feeling responsible for the things that happened the previous night, James apologizes for stepping out of the line. Surprisingly, Carlo admits that he admires his dedication and the emotion he puts into everything he does. Given that he'd advised him to be courageous and to follow Brit, James reveals that he had bought her Portugal tickets, a place she's always wanted to visit. If she wants to be by his side, she'll come. If she doesn't, he'll know not to search for her anymore. Before he leaves, he remembers the words of Eliza, so he tells Carlo about La Serena. A smile forms across his face as he remembers the memories he's made with her, especially with the mermaid. The men hug it out in the end before they go find their loved ones. Following her favorite antique shop, Carlo manages to find Elizia's house and gets her son to let him in. Once he gets in, he sees Eliza reading a book, so he calls out to her. She is pleasantly surprised to see him, which is why she offers him some wine. Turning around, he sees a lot of records along with a record player. Chuckling to himself, he puts on a romantic melody as she comes back with the wine. "Why did you leave me?" is what he says, and she can't help but laugh. As old love gets a new start, Henry's play gets loved by the crowd. After the last scene, Veronica and James stand on the stage as the crowd cheers their names, smiling from ear to ear and feeling like true actors. Love is what makes the three men successful. Henry wouldn't have made the play if it wasn't for Anna, and Carlo couldn't have written a play if he didn't meet Eliza. As far as James goes, we see him on the train to Portugal, following his and Brit's heart.